Hello.
Hello. Hello. Welcome to another episode of It To Vin It. I'm Vashti.
I'm Genna.
This is the show where we talk about our favorite pop culture icon, Vin Diesel. Every week, that was a silly thing. Sorry, seeing across the screen, the muted. But every other week, we talk about a different movie as we make our way through Vin Diesel's filmography, and just break down what it is that we like about this movie, what it is that we love about Vin Diesel, and be able to answer, hopefully, some of the questions from you all.
Such as, why do we love Vin Diesel so much? But I promise you that the more you listen to us talk about Vin Diesel, the more you will understand why we love him. Please chime in on the chat. We want to hear from you. Have you seen today's movie? So today, we're talking about Pitch Black. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Little synopsis of the film is this movie set about 50 years in the future. Came out in 2000, by the way. Carolyn Fry is the space pilot of a craft traveling to a galaxy called New Mecca. Among the passengers is Johns, a cop who has convicted murderer Riddick in his custody. When the spacecraft is forced to make an emergency landing on an uninhabited planet, the three, along with a few other passengers, are the only ones who survive. Forming an alliance in an effort to survive, Riddick must win the trust of his fellow castaways in order to lead the group against the planet's carnivorous inhabitants. So suffice to say, this movie is ridiculous.
Wow. Yes. Ridiculous.
Certainly.
It is, would you say that it is Vin Diesel's passion project?
I would, in fact, say that. It is, and we'll talk about this more throughout the show. This movie is his love. This is his joy. It is what he goes back to time and time again. And I think it shows.
Yeah, definitely. It is weird. It is very heady science fiction. And it's very post-apocalyptic.
Yeah. Had you seen this movie before?
Well, I mean, yes, we saw it. I've only seen it one time before, and TBH, not really good at paying attention to it the first time, so it was like I was seeing it again this time around. But I had really never had much of an interest in the Chronicles of Riddick series. I mean, we know from our first show, I was mentioning like my love of Vin Diesel is new. I really hadn't seen a lot of his movies until we started watching the Fast and Furious franchise, and so let alone had I definitely had not seen any of his other movies, and so there wasn't I don't think I had a lot of expectations going into this movie. The first time I saw it, I think I had less expectations going into it this time, and it was mainly about like, can I pay attention this time, and will I retain any of that information?
Yeah, fair. Did you?
We'll see.
I see the question in the chat about whether he was involved in getting it made. Don't worry, we will talk about that. But so for me, I had seen this movie. I mentioned in the last show, I did a deep dive of Vin Diesel movies and like marathoned them one summer in 2009. I think that was the first time I had seen it. And I watched this one and the other Riddick movies. And I obviously loved it. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I love action movies. I love Vin Diesel. So this movie is like my niche area, I guess. It sort of meets all those things in the middle. So I already knew that I love this movie, even though it is unintentionally campy. I would say it's very silly. The plot is a little bit wild. Our dog is going a little wild in the background as we talk about this. But yeah, so I loved this movie. So in terms of whether Vin Diesel had a hand in making this movie, he was not one of the original creators of the film. He really only came on because he was cast in it, but he was like definitely excited about it. It is one of his first major films.
Yeah, I mean, I think before this, he was in Saving Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Never saw the movie, so I don't actually know like how much
Small
of a role
part.
he had that in that movie. But so yeah, like the fact that it's his first big role feels significant.
Yeah, but so, and also he, as we talked about last time, he loves sci-fi. He's a nerd, so he loved this project. He got really into it, and he later down the line is like really committed to Riddick. From like this movie onwards, he's really committed to Riddick, and we'll talk about how so later, because it comes back in the way that his career plays out, how deeply involved in Riddick he is. So a little bit about like the budget and the filming of this movie. It had a $23 million budget, which is like really small. And it did not do very well. It got, I think it like made 100 million maybe total. It was a cult classic a little bit, but like it kind of flopped. Because it came out around, hello, everybody else, if you're in the chat, say hi to us. We want to know you're here. Yeah, it came out around the same time as like The Matrix, and it's kind of reminiscent of Aliens, and it did not do as well as any of those films.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, you know, and I think this is my experience watching it the first time and this time too, is like, it feels pretty heady.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like you have to be somebody, whereas like The Matrix, for example, is something like, yes, it is, you have to think a lot when watching it, but there's like, I think like a bigger mass appeal to it as well. Like this one, you have to be, for Pitch Black, you have to be committed to like sci-fi. You're like, yes, I like sci-fi, or I like dark comics, right? And that's not, that just has like less of a mass appeal.
Yeah, it's also like not like it's sort of actiony, but it isn't an action movie. So it, you know, I think like where there's a lot of action in The Matrix and a lot of action maybe in other films more similar to it that came out at this time, it's kind of, you're right, it's like you have to follow the plot, and the plot isn't like, you know, the greatest. So yeah, so it was filmed in Australia, which is like very evident in the landscape of the movie. And what's cool is they did use some Australian actors in the film, although they don't make it.
Spoiler. Spoiler on this 20-year-old movie.
Yeah. So yeah, so moving into the film, we open with like a monologue from Vin Diesel as Riddick, and we get a glimpse of him.
I've already forgotten that happened.
We get a glimpse of him, and he is tied up, chained up in the ship, and he's blindfolded on this ship. And we have a picture that of this, and we don't really know a lot about what's happening. Here he is, Vin Diesel, and he's got a horse bit in his mouth. He's got like leather bindings. And yeah, this is the first we see of Vin Diesel, and then we kind of don't see him for a while.
Yeah, because they're just on this ship sort of going through space, doing the thing, and then they like get into a meteor shower or something, right? Okay, great. Again, my retention low. So the meteors like come, and they basically, it's a big crash. It's a spaceship crash. All the people who are on board are in this like stasis because it's interplanetary travel, and so it takes takes a bit of time to do that, and so you have to be put to sleep in order to go.
And what we don't really understand and is never really explained, it's like everyone on the ship is like going to New Mecca because they want to, and then there's Riddick who's like being transported for like to another prison, we guess, but we don't really understand like why is he on the ship with like regular passengers.
Also, why isn't he in like a little cryo chamber kind
Right.
of?
He is the only one not in this cryo chamber. He is just bound in this like leather, and like it doesn't make any sense. No one knows why. It is never explained.
Yeah.
We don't know. We never know. So then they're crashing. And at this point, you know, the captain dies, and then the like other pilot almost kills all the passengers. She decides not to. They crash land. Some of them make it, not all of them.
Yeah. And then they're in Australia.
Yeah, then they're in Australia. Turns out they landed on a planet with 3 suns.
Yeah. Just weird, bizarre. It like has all the. I think what's really interesting about this movie, and I don't know if it's a good interesting or if it feels really dated, is it's like all bluish and purpley, and like it just depending on which sun is more vibrant at that moment, like the color of the scenery really changes.
So I actually love this because it is classic blue-orange action film, right? Like if you look at, and I wish I had thought to pull pictures up, but if you look at like movie posters of action films and sci-fi films, often they're like blue or orange or blue and orange. And this whole film, the entire time, is in this coloration of either blue tint or orange tint. And it feels really intentional to be like, hey, we're an action film. Look at us, like, hey. Even though it's kind of not.
It's like, we're not just sci-fi.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
It's really silly. But so then we find out on this planet, they land, they crash, whatever. They're trying to decide what do we do with Riddick? You know, like he's chained, he's like tied up, and Johns, who we talked about in the synopsis, who's a cop, turns out he's actually a bounty hunter. He's really in charge of transporting Riddick, and has like, they have like a weird, we'll show you Johns later. They have a weird rivalry.
Yeah.
It like is kind, it doesn't totally make sense anyway. But so they land, right, and they're trying to figure out what is like, what are they going to do with this criminal who's killed people. And then they find out there's going to be an eclipse on this planet with 3 suns.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
Where their whole goal right now is they have crashed onto this planet and they're trying to get off the planet, right? Like, but they don't know how. They're trying to see if like there's anybody on this planet that they can get help from.
Oh yeah.
And that's where they see it's like there's nobody there. But there are all these buildings. It looks very desolate. So it's clear that like there was some sort of society that existed. But
and they need to
mysteriously gone.
They need to find water, like they end up finding bones. So like, okay, things have died here. And then they I think Riddick breaks free, and they accidentally kill a different passenger because they think it's Riddick.
Yeah, I think that's like the first half hour of this movie is so chaotic, where
So
it's just like, what is going on? Why? What is their goal or their intention? That is, I think this is why I like had such a hard time retaining information from this movie, is because it feels really just all over the place.
Well, I also, yes, agreed. And I think what's interesting too, first of all, I read a lot of like, obviously like movie, what's the word? Like articles about this. Yes, all 3 suns are going to eclipse.
Yeah, so there's like this giant Saturn-ish looking planet that, so as they have obviously just found out that this planet is about to experience a 22-year eclipse, and of course it happens right as they have crashed onto this planet. And after they have found out this information, they go outside and they're like, oh my God, that planet is coming to eclipse all 3 suns.
What I was going to say about the chaos too is that like, so Riddick shows, yeah, pitch black, exactly.
Boom.
Riddick shows up, we like see him, and then we don't see him, right? He escapes. We know very little about him except that he's like a criminal and he's killed people. And then
he's like really scary.
And he's really scary.
And everybody is afraid of him, but we
don't
truly do not know why.
Yeah. And then he just sort of keeps appearing in the background. We see him like when they accidentally kill. He's wearing his goggles. When they accidentally kill another passenger, then they look past the other passenger, and Riddick is just like sitting in this beach chair, just like watching them. And then like there's another scene where Fry, the new captain, who was the pilot, and Johns are talking, and he's just like creepily behind them. So we just like sort of see him appearing, but we never see him moving. He's just there, and we don't know anything about him. And then they get to this point, and they're like, okay, either do we like allow him to stay free and like use him or not? And this is after they've learned about the eclipse, and then we learn
about his eyes.
His eyes.
Great. I wasn't sure. Like, sorry. You're like, and then, but yeah, I think like as they're figuring out that there's going to be this eclipse. They need to get the fuck out of there. And they're figuring like, what do we do with Riddick? And so, yeah, this picture, like we go back into the hull of the ship, and is it Fry? Is it Johns? One of
Fry.
them. Yeah, one of them is talking to him about like, okay, it seems like you might be useful, you big scary killer. Like, help us.
He's like,
because it's also like a
kind
really
of trust
like,
me.
He's like really good with piloting.
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? Like,
well, he escaped from prison at some point prior to this by stealing a ship. We learn he like kills the captain and steals a ship. But so then we learn he's got these eyes, and
they look very silvery.
Mm-hmm. And he wears goggles most of the time because he has, when he was in prison in the darkness, he like paid or traded someone to alter his eyes to be able to see in the dark better. We don't it is not really explained why he needed that. But it is true. So somehow they miraculously crash on this planet that's going to have an eclipse that only he will be able to see. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it is wild. I think this movie just like hinges too much on wacky coincidence.
Yeah, he makes good choices. He like knows. He can see that he's gonna. He can see in the future he's gonna need his eyes to be altered because he's gonna somehow crash land on this planet. Miriam, I need you to know that I agree. This movie is hilarious. I think the other thing I keep reading about it is like Vin Diesel, first of all, went hard on this character, right? We don't get Riddick till like 30 minutes into the film, and then he is like everywhere, and he is really into it. So like we start seeing Riddick, and he starts showing up, and we see he begins to have these dynamics with these characters, right? So first we've got him and Johns, who's the like bounty hunter / cop guy.
I like to think he's like a Matthew McConaughey wannabe.
Yeah. I mean, look at him. He looks like he wants to be Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah. And I think even like sort of carries himself in the same way throughout the movie too. But if Matthew McConaughey was like such an asshole.
Yeah, he sucks. He is a creep. He is just such a fucking dick. He's the worst. He is constantly like, he doesn't want to kill Riddick, we learn, because he wants the bounty. So he's like, I just have to try to keep Riddick in line at all times by threatening him constantly.
Yeah. And Riddick knows, right? Like he knows that Johns isn't going to kill him. So I think he feels like really invincible, really emboldened, and pushes a lot of buttons around it. It's like, what are you gonna do? Kill me?
But meanwhile, Johns just spends the whole time making the crew really scared of him because he doesn't want them to trust him. Because also, Johns knows that Riddick is way stronger, way more powerful, could totally kill him.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's his dynamic with Johns, and Johns tries to like really get the captain Fry like to not like him. So then there's his dynamic with Fry, which is complicated. Because I think like he's really creepy to her in a lot of ways. He like comes up behind her a lot. At one point we see him like cut off a lock of her hair.
Yeah.
I don't understand why.
Well, just because he's spooky.
He's spooky. Anyway, so but then eventually like they start to build a relationship and dynamic, and she's really like, I'm not sure I can trust you, but we can tell that she kind of does.
Yeah, I mean, I think like whereas John's from the get, we know that he has like this whole vendetta against Riddick. Like this is going to be his big payday, but also it seems like they've had this history of sort of like chase and escape and chase and escape. And so he's sort of also like at wit's end with him. Whereas with Fry, she doesn't really know anything about him except for like he's a dangerous criminal who has killed people. But I think like she really takes the role of being the new captain, I think really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so she is thinking about what is the greater need, and understanding, like I think that she was the one who found out that there was going to be this eclipse, and she was the one who talked to Riddick about his ability to see in the dark. And so I don't know, she had a brain and put two and two together and was like, oh, this guy, he's gonna help. He's gonna be the one to help get us out of here. Or at the very least, like, we can't do this without him.
Yeah. Well, she also has a lot of guilt because she almost sorry. Our dog is like, there's a closed door. You need to let me out of here. I don't want to hear about Vin Diesel anymore. But she almost kills all the passengers on the ship. And so she has a lot of guilt about it. And so she's kind of like, we have to trust him. You know, like they can't really trust me, and I need to live up to that. So like we have to trust him. And so I think she's like really just trying to do right. So throughout all of this, we learn like people start dying, and at first they think it's Riddick, and then we learn there are these, we don't know what they are, but these like things that are killing people in the darkness of the planet before it gets dark. But like there are these like caves.
I was gonna say tubes, like little sand tubes. They go down, but it's like, yeah, it is a cave. It's an underground cave that they go into, and I think Fry's the one who goes down, is like exploring, trying to see what it like
what's in there.
And that's where we see these weird land sharks. I would say
air land sharks. They fly.
It's true. They're so creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it's like a I don't know, just a big scary monster.
They're real creepy. They've got these huge jaws, and they like literally tear people apart.
Yeah.
Like
we see them tear a person in half and then devour.
It's wild. So we don't really understand what they are. We don't know what they are, but they only they don't exist like in the light. They only exist in these like dark caves. And so that's when it's like, oh fuck, you know, they've been like figuring out what they can do to get off this planet. They found another ship. They have to like get power cells, whatever. But then they're like, oh no, we have to finish this before the darkness comes. Which all of a sudden, by the way, they start to see that planet rise, and it's like minutes later that the eclipse starts. It is the fastest eclipse I've ever seen come up. They're like, they learned about it, they crash, they learn about it, all of a sudden it's dark.
In like hours.
Yeah.
That's it.
Whatever. So it's really wild. So they're like, oh fuck, it's gonna be dark. How are we gonna get the power cells? Slowly but surely they're all dying, like they're being killed off by these creatures. So Riddick, right, has to be the hero. Along the way, there's like there are a bunch of kids on the ship, most of whom die. Actually, almost all of them die.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, the ones that die, when we say kids, it's like teenagers to maybe early 20s.
Maybe.
I don't know.
They're young people.
Yeah.
And then there's this one kid, Jack, who pretty early on we see immediately shave his head, get these goggles, and become Riddick.
Yeah. Oh, right. Because like when Fry is talking to Riddick about his past and whether or not we can trust him. I'm saying we as if I'm a part of this movie now. Can we trust Riddick? Jack is like this kiddo who is sort of exploring in the shadows, and we see Riddick's eyes for the first time, and Jack is like, whoa, what do I have to do to get those eyes? And Riddick's like, gotta go to prison. Like, okay, cool. But you do see like immediately, Jack is like, oh, this guy, role model. Total role model. Very I think like very youthful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, oh, here's someone that like I really am immediately idolizing, and I want to be exactly like them.
Mm-hmm.
And so like goes into, as they're like exploring the abandoned settlement, finds a pair of clippers and is like, ooh, these are great. And then we see them, like everybody, and like getting ready to go collect the power cells, and then we see Jack looking like this, where he's like, look at me, I found these goggles, I shaved my head, I'm Riddick now.
Karen, you're totally right. Obsession is definitely a theme in this movie. Like obsession with everything. John's obsession with Riddick and like their back and forth. Riddick's weird obsession with Fry, which we like never really understand. Jack's obsession with Riddick. And it's definitely a theme of this movie. So Jack like is really going hard on being Riddick. And it's like kind of amazing. They ultimately decide, okay, here's what we have to do. We have to get a bunch of lights strapped to ourselves, go through a canyon to get these power cells and bring them back.
Yeah. Because they're grabbing the power cells from the crashed ship. They found, like when they were exploring in the settlement, they found another ship that could be used but didn't have power. And so they were bringing the power cells from crashed ship to new ship. At that in between, or as they're making that plan, is when the eclipse happens, and everything is dark, and the land sharks come out of hiding.
I want to say that like Fry was like, we need to get these immediately. And Johns was like, if we get them too soon, Riddick will kill us all and steal the ship. Yeah. And so my personal theory about this whole movie is if Johns wasn't such a fucking dick, they would have all survived. Mm-hmm. But instead he was like, we can't trust Riddick. He's going to kill us all and steal the ship. So we have to wait. And then because they wait, it becomes eclipse happens, and then they have to navigate in the dark with all these scary land sharks.
Yeah. And so, like the second half of the movie is them trying to get from one end of the canyon to the other end. When it was light out, that didn't take any time at all. It's dark out, everyone's dying.
Mm-hmm. Literally, like everyone is dying. And so they're going through the canyon, and like so many things happen in this canyon. First of all, my favorite line in the whole movie happens where Riddick, the first time Riddick comes is almost attacked by these monsters, and he kills one, and he goes, they didn't know who they were dealing with. It's like, what?
They didn't know they were dealing with a human who could see in the dark.
Yeah, like this movie is just so, I read this review of it that was just like, this film is, Vin Diesel was just on the cusp of becoming the awesome dieselness we know today. But even though it was his first meaty role, It's obvious he relished playing Riddick's tough guy, live by my own code persona. This is most evident when young Diesel delivers his very serious lines with a half grin, letting the audience in on the secret that he knows he's the coolest and that we're lucky enough to be introduced to him. Which, like, I think just sums up Vin Diesel's acting in this film so well, where it's just like, he is thrilled to be here. He does not, I don't think he does have writing credit. I'm going to double check though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, yes, I agree with the sentiment of that. And I think that, like, what we know about Vin Diesel is that he is somebody he really loves to have layers to his characters, and that he is consistently like a character who is the most misunderstood, right? Like, thinking back to Iron Giant, how, Vin Diesel really identified with the Iron Giant because, oh, here's this big scary robot that everyone's afraid of, but like has a heart of gold. Here he is again as Riddick, where he's this big scary killer, or a spooky criminal, or whatever we want to call him. But he also, we see the moments in which he has, I wouldn't say he has a heart of gold, but I think he can see humanity.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He has humanity. He does not have writing credit in this film. He really just, he leans into it. Chai, what's up? Welcome to Pitch Black. He really leans into it though, because he's like, again, this is one of his first major films, right? So he's like,
or I guess like first film where he's like, I mean, the character.
He's not, for so long in this movie, he's not the main character, but then he sort of becomes the main character. And we really like, I think what's interesting about his character in this movie is he doesn't really get a character arc, right? Like, he doesn't grow as a person. He doesn't grow as a character, where Fry does. We see her sort of like, from the moment she almost kills the crew to like changing her mind and deciding she wants to save everybody and like really taking Jack under her wing. We really see her grow as a character. And then, spoiler alert, she dies.
It's so, I remember like it happens, it's one of the last scenes in the movie. And it's after this whole thing where, Riddick, he got through the canyon and he was able to get onto the ship, put the power cells in, and he was like really about to leave this planet without everybody. He had like, basically they had run out of light. So Jack, Fry, and is it the Imam?
Yeah, the Imam.
He like basically locks them away in a cave because like that's where they're gonna be safe from the land sharks. But he like gets into the ship and he's like, I gotta go. But then innovative Fry has like found these glowworms and has created a light that she's able to then also run through the rest of the canyon. Wow. Get to the ship right as he's about to take off, and he's like, oh fuck, I have to like really reckon with this. And she convinces him to go back and like go get the people out of the canyon or the cave that he's locked them into. And part of why he does that is because Fry says, or he asks Fry, like, would you die for them? Which, because she had almost killed everybody, was, I think, like the end of her redemption arc, where she's like, yes, I would die for them. And he sees that commitment and respects it, and he's like, okay, let's go. And then as they're coming back, everybody's like got into the ship. It's the very last scene. And she like, I don't know. I think
he fights a land air shark and is like bloodied and down, and she like goes back out and she's like, come on, man, like we gotta go. And she's like, I would die for them, but not for you. And then he's like, okay, and he's like, whatever. And then all of a sudden you just see her, he's like very close to her. And it looks like they're maybe hugging or gonna kiss, but it's also not like a sexual tension moment. And then all of a sudden you see like the life get sucked out of her almost. And you asked me, like, did he kill her? Because it really
I
looks like
didn't think that he killed her. What it looked like is that he had a knife because he was fighting the land shark, and it looked like I think that like she fell into his knife, kind of thing, because there was a land shark behind them.
But what it is the land shark comes in and like stabs her. But as we see this happen, it like takes her body away. It's like really kind of wild.
I know, and I think it's such a cheesy line. He's like, die, like,
He just says, not for me.
oh yeah, yeah, not for me, because she had said she wouldn't die for him.
And he's
Not
just
for
like
me.
so distraught because she did die for him, even though she said she wasn't going to. And then we sort of see his resolve change a little bit, but not that he is very like he has a strong survival instinct, which he talks about. But I think, you know, prior, as we were saying prior to this, he's like fighting this land air shark. Yeah, it definitely was not part of her plans to die for him. It really wasn't. But she does take a liking to him, and part of it is because he like does help them. He does save them. And so one of my favorite parts about this movie is they're going through the canyon, and so now we're gonna get to some like deeper stuff, right? They're going through the canyon, and he's like, they track blood, so we can't leave the girl alone. And Fry's like, I'm not bleeding. What are you talking about? And he's like, not you. And then we see Jack. So
yeah, this is where we learn that Jack is not a trans character,
which is like kind of wild. This is 2000, right? And it turns out Jack is like, I thought it would be easier if everyone thought I was a boy. And so like they play it off like Jack is just like trying to make it easier to like get away on the ship, but like Jack is trans.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny when I was in thinking about Jack, and I was thinking about this earlier today too. It's like this movie came out in 2000. I'm thinking about like who was I in the year 2000? I was like a fifth grader, right? And if I had seen this movie then, I fully would have been like, Jack is so cool. Not knowing anything about anything about me, but I'd be like, oh yeah, no, Jack is really cool. I like this character. I care about this character. And you know what? The reason I think about that is because of my favorite movie as a kid was Panic Room, because I loved Kristen Stewart in that movie. Little baby gay tomboy Kristen Stewart. I idolized her.
I mean, me too. I watched that movie every time it was on TV. I didn't know why.
Yeah. And so like I know that like that's around the same time, right? It's like I totally would have been like, yes, Jack, very cool, very who I want to be in the way that I currently exist. Like I don't know but it would probably be like a complicated like I would do a lot of mental gymnastics around gender.
I was just gonna say,
yes.
You would just ignore all the gender parts and be like, no, that's just a cool teen.
Yeah, just a cool kid. And I want to be a cool kid. Look at me, cool kid.
Yeah. But like, it is really wild that like they don't like tackle it, right? But that they just have this character who's like casually playing with gender. And like, other than the fact that there's this like big reveal of like, Jack's actually a girl, they like don't talk about it ever again.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That was something I felt like really complicated to me is after that like reveal is like all of a sudden this insistence on like And it's specifically Riddick. It's less so everybody else,
Mm.
but specifically Riddick being like the girl, the girl, the girl, the girl, the girl.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to even like everybody else is still calling Jack Jack,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like thinking about Jack as the person that they had known him, right? And Riddick, I don't know. It was like it was really weird. I was like really sensitive to it or I just like really aware of it, I guess.
Mm.
And just like why? Because I think before that he hadn't really been referencing Jack like as a person, and like yeah, I don't know. It was
But I think what's interesting is like even when he hadn't been referencing Jack before, he was like treating Jack with respect, which I thought was interesting, right? Like he even when he was like unsure of everyone on the ship, he was like, I see you imitating me and I'm here for you.
Oh yeah, there's like that moment that they have when it's still light out, where they're like on a little sand cruiser,
Oh yeah.
and you see them sort of side by side, and they just look alike, and it's really silly.
Yeah.
And they're about to come up on this like giant skeleton, and Riddick's just like makes a little movement to like move your head so you don't get your head like chopped off by this skeleton.
Yeah. But so when they're going through the canyon, right? Big reveal, Jack's a girl. And then they like all these things happen, and eventually Riddick and Johns end up at the front of the group trying to like traverse the canyon. And the rest of the group is behind them, and Jack is like, what are they talking about? And realistically or like understandably worried because Johns is talking about we should kill someone off and use them as bait, like chum with sharks. And we should kill the girl. That's what John says. And Riddick is like, oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. Maybe we should kill someone. And then lures Johns into a trap where he just like pulls him away and then gets his light out of there, and then it's total darkness. He can see a monster coming, steps out of the way, Johns gets killed. And I just love it so much because he's like, yeah, you're totally right, we should kill someone. And you know, he's like, oh yeah, the girl. And Riddick is like, in his head, he's just like, fuck that, I know who we're gonna kill. And then just like obliterates Johns. And then like it is never mentioned.
No. Yeah, because they're just like, oh, whoops, I guess Johns is dead because everybody else had been dying. It like wasn't a thing, even though the scene itself and between Johns and Riddick, it was a thing.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's also just wild. It's like they've been on this chase back and forth forever. And then it just culminates with Riddick just being like casually taking Johns out.
Yeah.
Which I love. But so the other thing about Riddick is that he realizes that, and when we see him with the monster, he realizes the monsters have a blind spot like right here, which is why when he like goes head to head with the monster so that he can do this like mirror dance because then they can't see him. And he
they didn't know who they were messing with.
Because they didn't know who they were messing with. But at one point he is like, I find them beautiful. And this is when we realize that Riddick, aka I think Vin Diesel, resonates with these monsters who are also probably just misunderstood.
Yeah, he's the perpetual misunderstood character of like the people or the creatures or whatever that looks big and scary. There's so much more to them than just that. Yeah, you know, and again, like I was saying before, like I think that is something he carries with him in every single role that he takes on. Because, you know, it's like you think about like, what do you think about when you first think of Pitch Black or Chronicles of Riddick or like Triple X or Fast and Furious? You just like from like a surface level or from just like looking at a trailer, you know, and I think me as somebody who saw Vin Diesel like as a person in the world but didn't know anything about him, I also had this perception of like, oh, here's like just your big muscly action hero,
as you can see in our art.
Yeah, big muscly action hero, And like this is vapid fluff.
And I'd love to know what like all of your thoughts are when you like learned that we were gonna have a show about Vin Diesel, but when you maybe first learned about Vin Diesel, your thoughts about Vin Diesel. Because like today, right, we went to get our haircut, our amazing haircuts, at Cowlook in Brooklyn. If you live in Brooklyn, go to Cowlook, they're amazing.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my hairdresser, who is a friend of mine, and I was like, yeah, we're doing this Twitch show about Vin Diesel. And she was like, I saw that. Why? Like, why are you doing this show about Vin Diesel? And that has been, I think, everyone's reaction, almost everyone's reaction. Chai, who is here in the chat, immediately was like, yes, I love Vin Diesel. I am here for you. And I appreciate that. But I think most people are like, why do you like Vin Diesel? Why should I care about Vin Diesel? And then they're like, convince me. And I think my physical therapist asked me this too. And I think it's like, the answer is that Vin Diesel like really cares about his roles. He
considers himself a thespian. Like that's the word he uses. He really pushes back against this action hero caricature and stereotype. And yeah, Chai, like what you're saying in the chat, right? Like he always takes these roles where you see him, you make assumptions, and then he does a lot, like as a thespian, to turn those characters on their head, whether it's like what you expect, whether it's just or it's something totally different. I think no matter what, he's always adding a lot of layers. Like he's, even if like maybe the scripts that he gets and the characters that he gets are not really deep, he makes them deep. He like adds those layers on.
Chai, you just summed up so perfectly what I love about him. He is a theater kid in a himbo mold. I'm gonna use that line for sure 100% because he is. And to the point, one of my favorite facts about him is that if you've seen the movie Step Up, you know that in Step Up, Channing Tatum's character destroys a theater at a performing arts school and then is forced to do like community service by cleaning up the school, and then auditions and gets into the school for dance because he is a dancer, blah, blah, blah. Vin Diesel.
Real life Vin Diesel, Mark Sinclair
in high school trashes a community theater, and instead of punishing him, they put him in the production, and that is how he got into acting. So theater kid in a himbo mold is like truly accurate. And when we talk about this role, he talks about like really, well, we read an interview where he talked about how action stars, and I talked about this with Vivian, my hairdresser today, action stars, like he says, you know, we often talk about the action in action movies, but we don't talk about the acting, but like Arnold Schwarzenegger makes those movies. And if he wasn't such a good actor, they wouldn't be so good. And the same can be said, you know, for me as an action star. He takes his roles so seriously. He puts his whole heart into it. And that's, you know, what we see in Riddick is that he's like, I'm going to lean into this character.
Yeah. And I think like, what's happening in the chat now is like talking about Fast and Furious, and our next episode in 2 weeks is about the Fast and the Furious, the start of what will eventually be an 11 movie series on fucking car heists and car racing, right? And it seems so that is a franchise that seems so flat, so two-dimensional, right? And I think that like they do well, not just because of like fun car stuff, even though like there is definitely fun car stuff that happens, but I think that's where Vin like really does, and I would say like I'll give credit to all the actors. They really they make a story of it. I cannot wait to talk about Fast and Furious, but I think that's exactly what it is that he contains multitudes.
I want to read this other quote from another article that I read because I think it's really great. So as much as Dominic Toretto and Xander Cage will always dominate Diesel's screen persona, it's just a shame that he doesn't get to bring more characters like Riddick to life, because he has the incredible ability to transform the absurd into the iconic through sheer force of passion. And I really
Love it.
could not agree more. He just
Wow.
is so passionate about everything he does. And I mean, I think especially Riddick, which shows up because, so we'll talk about this in the Fast and the Furious, but he was like, he did the first Fast and Furious movie, and then he was like really reluctant to do more because he really wanted to do more Riddick because he loved playing Riddick, and he wanted to flesh that character out more and play more of that and da da da. And so we really see him trying to choose this like deeper character, although I would argue that Dominic Toretto is very deep.
Yes.
And we'll talk all about that. But he really wanted to like lean further into Riddick because also, as we talked about last episode, he's a huge nerd. And
I mean, like, it's his passion project.
it's his passion,
right?
project.
Like, he does the Fast and Furious franchise so that he can produce and fund Riddick.
Yeah. And yes, exactly, Karen. Someone has to play the muscle bound guy well. That is him. And it's interesting, right? Like I would say even in Pitch Black, he's not even that muscly. He gets so much more muscly, and he really
I think he's like that lean cut muscle, and then he becomes like thick muscle.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much.
Either way, I love a hunk. Like, I love a big old like muscly boy. It's great.
It's true. It's true. It is how I feel like I convinced you to love Vin Diesel. It's like, you love a hunk anyway. And I was like, great, this will work well. But yeah, it's like, yeah, he's thick. It's like, it's just really, he really like kicks off his career with Riddick and just is like, that's all he wants. But as Chai was saying, like he gets, and this is what I was talking about today with Vivian, is like, he gets the first Fast and the Furious, and then the Fast and the Furious takes off in this like way that no one could have imagined, and they make so many movies, and he sort of he obviously does other things along the way, which we're gonna do the first Fast and Furious and then other films and then come back to that franchise because there are so many of them that we could be there forever. But he does get other things, but that is really what dominates his career, right? Like they all are like, that's what he's known for, even though he has Triple X, which I'm so excited. I cannot wait to watch Triple X.
Never seen it. I've seen so few movies.
That's true. But so like he really, like he ends up, but even Triple X, right? He ends up in these like big action movies as a big action star, and he is approaching all of them as this thespian, this actor, this like he like really gets into character.
Yeah. And I don't and what I'll always say about Vin Diesel is that he is somebody who really, I think we talked about an Iron Giant too. Like he is somebody who really I think thinks about his masculinity and really challenges masculinity and adding like a lot of depth to his performance of gender, right? I don't think we see that quite as much in Pitch Black. Like, I think he really just
he's too busy being like a big scary guy, right?
Right, he's a big scary guy. But I think Fast and Furious is like a franchise where you do really see the ways in which like he I think like
is so nuanced.
Yeah, really nuanced in his masculinity and the way he performs his gender. And so I see Karen like saying, will we eventually talk about why he and The Rock don't get along?
You're gonna have to wait.
Yeah, we have to wait until Fast and Furious for that.
Till Fast 5 when The Rock shows up.
Yeah,
so
it's gonna be a long time. But also, we do know that anybody who is a part of the Fast and Furious franchise is family.
Like truly, his kid's called Ludacris, Uncle Ludacris.
Yeah, like once you're, you know what? It's the Olive Garden when you hear your family. Like that is what the Fast and Furious is. But we can't talk too much more about
No, that's next.
Yeah.
And we have so much to say about it.
Yeah. So I know we only have like 6 minutes left. there were like some viewer questions that came through during our last episode, and I don't have all the answers for them. And so I'm sorry about that, but I do want to like put it out there. So questions that we've gotten so far, there are people who want to know about Vin Diesel's chart, his astrological chart. And I did have it pulled up at some point. I could pull it up again, but, or you could, I don't know. I think his sun sign really says it all. He's a Cancer. He is, I wouldn't say he's a stabby crabby kind of Cancer, but he is like he has a lot of feelings. He's very protective. And he's just a big old softie. And I think he's like a Scorpio moon and a Sagittarius rising. And I also, another fun fact about Vin Diesel.
My rising is Cancer also.
Another thing fun fact about Vin Diesel, and especially when it comes to astrology, is his mother was an astrologer, and like that was her career when he was growing up. And so there's this really good really heartwarming interview from last year where he's on Jimmy Kimmel, and he's talking about, I think it's Jimmy Kimmel anyway, but he's talking about his mom being an astrologer, but then he gets like, when he gets asked about that, he's so excited. He's like, oh, he's asking Jimmy, like, do you know your sun? Do you know your moon and rising? Like, tell me more. And Jimmy Kimmel's like, no, absolutely not. I do not know that. He's like, oh yeah, no, of course you don't.
There are so many reasons Vin Diesel is queer canon, and him being deeply into astrology is one of them.
Absolutely.
I have his chart. His sun is in Cancer. His moon is Sagittarius. His rising is Scorpio. Mercury also in Cancer. Venus in Virgo. Me too. Mars in Libra.
Oh, it's a terrible place to have. Libra's a terrible Mars placement.
Those are like the most important ones. But yeah, that's like there's a lot of feelings.
He's
and a lot of
he has multitudes,
but also a lot of like, I'm just gonna fucking do the thing.
Yeah,
like a lot of that. Yeah. So I love him. Did you have another question that you were gonna answer?
I think the viewer question that I cannot answer today, and maybe you can answer it, maybe you can't, and if not, we'll answer it next time, is how did Vin Diesel get his name?
I have never been able to find anything about this. So if you know, Chai, I'm looking at you. If you know how Vin Diesel got his name, please let us know. But I have not been able to find this information.
Is it because his mom and stepdad have the last name Vincent? Is that where it comes from?
Where does Diesel come from?
Does he? Well, I mean, he likes cars, but like, where does it come from? If you know, please let us know. And we'll bring it back up on the next episode.
But this brings me to my question.
Okay.
Because my question, so, I don't know, earlier this week, I woke myself up, maybe not woke myself up. I was awake at 3 a.m. and all of a sudden in my brain, I asked myself, so some of you know, most of you know, oh yes.
Oh my God, Chai
is coming in clutch.
Yes.
His Vincent comes from the last name. Diesel was a nickname from Friends. I love it because he has all the energy. Amazing. Well, This is the best day. Thank you, Chai. I knew you would know. So anyway, so some of you know, most of you know, I play roller derby. My derby name currently, Whiskey Business. Good name, like it. But I woke myself up at 3 a.m. the other day, and I asked myself, should I change my derby name to Sin Diesel? So I ask all of you in the chat, should I change my derby name to Sin Diesel? Because I don't know. It's so good.
Yeah, it's a really good name.
I love Whiskey Business. It's great, but it might be time to honor the man, the myth, the legend.
Well, he's not a myth. He's real.
I don't know. Is he real? I've never met him.
Real enough. So, okay. We're in our last minute, which means it's time for us to wrap things up. Thank you all for being here and joining us for our second episode of It To Vin It and talking about Vin Diesel. Next time, we're going to be talking about the Fast and the Furious. Things to know, please follow us, follow Pop Culture Co-op on social, Pop Culture Co-op on Twitter and on Instagram. We have a PayPal. You can subscribe to us now. So do all the things, support this co-op and support all the other shows that are coming up. And if you want to follow us on social, I'm Just Moody Selfies on Instagram.
I'm at Whiskey Business 77. We have shows coming up this week. We're out of time, but you should check them out. Wednesday, we have Cinemarks coming up with Emily. Every Thursday, we have Every Rose Has Its Thorn with Stacy. That's a Bachelor show. Definitely worth checking out. And then follow at Pop Culture Co-op, and you can find all of our lists of shows and subscribe to us here on Twitch.
Yeah. And one last question that was in the chat is, what is on this shirt? It is Butch Please. It is a collaboration between Lockwood 51 and Tom of Finland. I don't know that they make these shirts anymore. I am really glad that I got one.
Yeah, but you should definitely check out Lockwood 51. They're great.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you all for joining us for another episode of It To Vin It, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.